The following broadcast is a presentation of Mount Zion Media Ministry.
Subject of the sermon today, why he wouldn't come down. Why Jesus wouldn't come down from the cross. That answer would take me the rest of the day if I exhausted every single reason. But for the sake of time, I want to share with you in this sermon today couple of the reasons for Jesus insisting on staying on that cross. I want to share these reasons for two things. The first is hopefully to instill within each of us here an even greater appreciation for what he did on the cross for us. Because if he had made the decision to come down, you and I would not be saved and enjoy all the benefits of our salvation. Let me see if I can make that even plainer. Just because you come to church and participate in all the ministries in the church don't mean you're saved. The only way you were saved is because of the work of Jesus Christ on Calvary and his resurrection. You're not saved because you live so good. So those of you that's feeling pretty good this morning and you got an eye of condemnation upon somebody else who you know something about or think you know something about, and you got your self-righteous check stuck out and you feel you're better than them in the sight of God, I want you to know that God has no merit system where he rewards you, make you more sanctified for being gooder than the next person. But we are given equal standing in the presence of God because Jesus decided to stay on that cross. Next reason I'm sharing this, and it's equally important, is for us to remember that Jesus was our earthly example of what godly men and women ought to be like. We are his disciples, and so we want to learn from him so we can be like him. And it's important that we learn how to be like him from this cross. Because all of us who follow him, as I told you last week, all of us who follow him are going to have some Friday experiences. What do I mean? I mean, you're going to have some experiences when you will be hung, if you will, on your cross. When you will be made a public spectacle out of. When people will talk about you and revile you and pick at you and run you down. And so when stuff come at you like that, you need to know how to handle it. And you don't want to look at me as a model for handling it because I don't always handle it right. But you can look to Jesus and you'll go right every time. And so here we go as we jump into this text. It's a horrible scene. Come on, use your sanctified imagination and go there. Jesus now has been beaten and crucified and been in an unjust court all Thursday night. And then the sun rises that Friday morning, and it's about 9 a.m. now, and they rush him up to Calvary because they want to kill him before sundown, before the Sabbath begins, because they got to get to church. They got to kill him before they get to church. That's something else, isn't it? Folk with religion, they'll kill you and still go to church. And so they're trying to get him. And so we learned that Simon Cyrene carried his cross up to Calvary. And so once they got there, the soldiers who had been assigned to him took nails and nailed his hands to that cross. They took those spikes and nailed his feet to the cross. And then they raised that cross up My daddy said they raised it up from a dead level to a living perpendicular. And they hung him there between two thieves. And the purpose of crucifixion was not only to kill him, but to humiliate him in the eyes of everybody. They could have easily executed him and buried him, but that wasn't enough. They not only wanted to kill his person, but they wanted to kill his influence. And so they left him hanging on the cross to die. And because they didn't know quite how to take him, the soldiers who were assigned to him stayed to stand watch, to make sure that nobody made an effort to rescue him and that he would die. And so picture, if you will, the first verse I read and said they sat there watching him. And while these soldiers are there watching him, people are walking by to look at him. See it in your mind. The crowd is processing all day. That's Jesus. Don't know who these two thieves are, but that's Jesus. And then they picked up this little chant from the crowd. If you be the Son of God, why don't you come down and save yourself? Listen at the sarcasm. You were talking big a few days ago. You said you were going to tear this temple down and then raise it up in 3 days. If you bad enough to tear the temple down and raise it up in 3 days, why don't you come down from the cross? And if you come down, you would convince us that you are the Son of God. You say you Son of God, right? And we want to believe, but we need some proof. So if you be the Son of God, come on down and save yourself. And then the Pharisees, the scribes, the elders, the preachers, the deacons, the church leaders, then they come by and they join in their own course. Look at you. You claim to be the king of the Jews. You can't claim to be God. You saved others. All right, Mr. Big Stuff. Now, why don't you save yourself? You did tell us that God was your father. Well, if he's your daddy, why don't he come save you? If you are who you say you are, prove it. How you want me to prove it? Prove it by coming down to the cross. Then we'll believe you. And then the thief on the cross, he on his way to hell, and he up there trying to pick at him. And he join in, and he starts to mock him and to pick at him. And even the soldiers, again, they get in on it. But Jesus wouldn't come down. The old folk used to say, not only would he wouldn't come down, but he did not even respond. He never said a mumbling word. I've often wondered, is mumbling in the dictionary? Or is that a word we just made up? Whichever it sounds good, say they never said a mumbling. Well, that means he didn't even grunt. He didn't even, he didn't even, no. He just hung there. And he wouldn't come down. And you do know that at any moment he could have come down. You do know that at any moment God could have sent a legion of angels to rescue him. But he didn't come down, wouldn't come down. No angels came to rescue him. He just stood there and never said a mumbling word. However, I want to submit to you that while he never said a mumbling word, he said a lot. And how many of you know that you can say a whole lot without opening your mouth? His refusal to answer, to respond, spoke volumes. Can I just dig in it a little bit? The first thing I want to say to you is that his refusal to respond verbally, his refusal to come down said this: Jesus knew who he was. Now, when I say he knew who he was, I'm talking about more than my name is Jesus. But what I'm saying to you is he knew that he knew who he was, and he was secure in his identity. See, when you know who you are and you are secure in who you are, you don't feel the need to prove, to validate your identity to anybody else. And so when Jesus is presented with the proposition, his silence, his faithfulness to that cross is really saying, I don't need to do that to prove to you who I am, because I already know that I am Jesus and I am the Son of God. You see, this is not the first time that Jesus has encountered this kind of conversation. Here he is at the end of this ministry, and he's presented with this little proposition: if you be the Son of God. If you remember, after he fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and he went into the wilderness, the devil tempted him. And what were the first two things? The Bible said he's hungry, and the devil said, if you be the Son of God, turn these stones to bread. But Jesus didn't fall for it. Then the Bible said the devil took Jesus up to a high pinnacle on the temple and said, if you be the Son of God, jump down. Because the Bible said if you jump down, nothing will happen to you. You won't even stump your toe. But again, the devil is using his identity to trip him up. Listen, the devil goes after his identity to trick him up. If he can get him to doubt, if he can get him in a position of ego tripping to prove who he is, the devil got a hook in him. Listen to me. I told you part of this is for our example. Do you not know that the devil still uses that tactic? The enemy still uses that tactic. If I can come at your identity, if I can get that hook in you, then I can be successful in causing you to get off on the wrong path. What do you mean, Pastor? Listen to history. Since we're still celebrating African American History Month. What was one of the master's tactics to get the slaves under control? Rob them of their identity. Give them new names. Give them a new culture. Tell them your culture, your history is it's a shame, it's a scam, there's nothing. And then get you to take on a new identity, new history, new culture, and then to make you over. Then I can control you. Because your identity is in my mind, in my hand. But check this out. How many of y'all ever been in a relationship? Ever been in a relationship with somebody who want to convince you that who you are is not adequate? And so they try to change you. And part of that changing you begins with some verbal abuse where they call you out your name. You see, you ought to be careful if you're in a relationship and let's just say your name Mary. But instead of him calling you Mary, he call you something that starts with the B, R, and H. And I even heard one fellow on the phone talking to his girlfriend. He called a dog, hey dog, be careful when people want to name you things, give you a brand new identity, or convince you that who you are is not adequate, so I got to make you over. Because if they can rob you of your sense of identity, more than likely they can get you to come down. So be careful and don't give it up. And sometimes that can come in what appears to be a positive way. People want us to associate with them, and so we become a part of their group. But I have to lose my personal identity to be a part of this group, and it can be a group for good. But any group that causes you to lose your identity, even if it's the church, you might ought to question what the real motive of the leaders and the participants of that group is. So Jesus didn't come down because he knew who he was. Secondly, Jesus didn't come down because, listen at the proposition, if you be the Son of God, it would be proof to us that you are the Son of God. God's your daddy. He saved. Why don't he save you now? Jesus not only knew who he was, but he understood his mission. And as a part of his mission, he had already authenticated or proven who he was, and the Father had done that through him. What do you mean, Pastor? Well, the Bible, Old Testament, had prophesied about the things that Jesus would do, and through God, Jesus was able to do them. He proved his power over nature. He spoke to the wind, the rain, the thunder. It obeyed him. He proved his power over demons. The demons bowed, and he cast out demons and showed that he had control over demons because God does. He proved he had power over sickness, over death. Everything in the earth, Jesus proved that he was the Son of God and had authority over all of it. And he had given them ample evidence, if they really wanted to believe, that he was the Son of God. His words and his work was proof enough for folk who were genuinely interested in believing. Can I just stick a pen right there and help you real quick? There are some people, if they're genuine about you, about your identity, about accepting you, then you can do some things, being the best you could be, letting God work through you, and that will be sufficient. But there are other people, like the folk in this text, I don't care what you do, it's not going to be enough. Because once you comply with that first requirement, then it's going to be something else, and you will never, ever measure up and be good enough when they've made up in their mind that you're not the one. And that's the way it was with Jesus. They had already made up in their mind that he was not it. And so you can't do anything else. And so what am I trying to tell you? Stop trying. Stop trying to please people when it's impossible to do it. And here's something else that God did to authenticate Jesus, to help make him secure in who he was. God spoke and said in the presence of people at his baptism, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I'm well pleased." He heard it. People heard it. That's my boy. That's my son. My seal of approval is on him. And Jesus was living, hanging on the cross with that. And he understood as a part of his mission, these miracles and so forth, all of that was a part of it, but the last part of it was to hang on that cross and die. And he'd come too far to quit the mission now. All he'd been through, and now he's on the cross, come this far, and really, he's almost at the end. Because after the cross come resurrection, then 40 days, and he up out of here, going back to the house. And so he come too far to give up now just because there was a cross, because a cross was a part of his mission. He came to seek and to save those who are lost and to give his life as a ransom for many. So the cross is a part of it. What am I trying to tell you? Some of us got to go by the cross before our mission is complete. I've done enough teaching now, so let me go ahead and take my seat. But before I do, let me answer some questions. I hear you, Pastor, talking about how Jesus felt good about himself and God authenticated him through his works and words and all this stuff, and his mission was the cross, but that's Jesus. And I'm not Jesus, and I don't feel that good about myself because I'm not so comfortable in my own skin and with who I be. Can I help you? First of all, let me tell you, you need to get folk out of your ears and get them out of your head. Because if you don't feel good about yourself, that means you've been listening to the wrong voices. You need to evict some folk out your head, out your heart. Because if you've had folk measuring you and building your identity on something like where you come from, on something like the complexion of your skin, on something like who your parents are, on things like whether or not you were born and reared by a single parent, on things like your grades in school, on things like whether you graduated from college or not, on things like whether you are Greek or not, on things like what you drive and things like where you live, on things like how you speak, on things like how you dress, on things like how your hair look, whether it's natural or whether it's wavy, whether it's long or whether it's short. You got people measuring you by the color of the bottom of your shoes, whether they're red or whether they are blue. You got people measuring you by how tall or how short you are. I'm going to tell you, you'll be messed up and a candidate for the psych ward if that's how you allow folk to measure you. And if you measure yourself by that stuff, you still will be a candidate for the psych ward, because everything I just talked about and so much more is impotent when it comes to making you feel good about yourself. Matter of fact, if that was true, you wouldn't have so many crazy folk running around here now. You got folk who got everything that you just heard me talk about, but they still don't have any real joy. You got folk that live in houses much bigger than yours, got mattresses much more comfortable than yours, but you know what? They can't even sleep at night because you got something that they don't have that money can't buy. You got peace that comes from knowing who you are in Jesus Christ. I wish I had a witness in here. So I'm trying to tell you, don't measure yourself by that. But so Pastor, what am I to do? I'm so glad you asked me. You need to do what Jesus did. Measure your identity by who God say you are. Y'all sit down for a minute. Let me just take my time and roll in here. See, you need to know. That's why you need to come to church. That's why you need a teaching preacher, so you'll know who you are in Christ Jesus. See, for those of us that's been born again, we are no longer the old man measured by old stuff, but we are new creatures in Christ Jesus. And so I got a new identity, and my natural daddy don't matter as much as who my new daddy is. Because you see, my new daddy is God the Father, and my identity now is tied in who my daddy say I am. And you know who your daddy say you are? Your daddy say you're his son and you're his daughter. And if you're his son and you're his daughter, then he puts you in the will and you are heir to everything that your daddy got. And so what do you mean you live in poverty and disadvantage when your daddy put you in the will, and since he's already died but yet live, and the will has been testated, everything that's available to you in the will is already available to you. So what you mean you poor when your daddy owned the cattle of 1,000 hills? What you mean you ain't got no joy when your daddy is the essence of joy? What you mean you don't feel loved when your daddy is love? He says, ladies, he says you are royalty. Your daddy said you're a queen. So what you doing acting like something other than a queen? You ought to step like a queen. Can I be real here? Queen don't let people call them hoes. Queens don't let people call them shouted. Shouted, brother, you better check yourself. Queens demand that you roll the red carpet out for them. Queens strut when they walk. When queens walk in a room, you know that somebody just stepped in the room because the atmosphere has changed. And one thing about a queen, it doesn't matter if she in a gown or blue jeans, she's still a queen. Ladies, listen. And there's another thing about a queen. A queen does not walk around wasting energy hating and envying other queens. Because a queen knows what she's working with. And when you know what you're working with, you ain't worried about what somebody else working with. You just work with what God gave you, and I swear it'll do. It. Queens are not insecure. Queens don't try to hold people under their feet. Because a queen knows that if it's mine and can't nobody take it. Kings, brothers. Kings walk with royalty. Kings wear their pants up high. Because kings understand they are guarding something precious and they don't want to expose it to the whole world. And when kings walk in the room, kings want the queen to know, want the world to know that there's a king up in here. Kings doesn't answer to who let the dogs out, because a king don't have any dog in him. Roo. That ain't how a king talk. Kings treat women like they're queens. King is a provider. King is a protector. Kings don't take the queen to work and drop her off and keep the car all day. But kings make sure she got a car to drive to work in, and then he got his own ride to go to church and to work. I didn't mean to go all this, but the Holy Ghost just got me. So kings don't intimidate queens to stay with them, because a king lives in such a way that he's a magnet and the queen wanna be with him. King don't lock them in the house and take the keys. King don't text them every 10 minutes, where you at, what you doing, who you talking to, why you wasn't home. Kings don't act like that. And any woman got a man that treat them like that, that ain't no real king, babe. You got a pimp disguised as a king, because pimps keep up with their women. I'm trying to move something. Okay. You're a royalty. You the head, not the tail.
Thanks for watching. Be blessed and continue walking in the light.